Hello and welcome to Brief Encounters. Our guest today is Preeti Kavilikatta, an LLM candidate at UCLA specializing in media, entertainment, and technology law. She holds a gold medal in journalism from the University of Mumbai, an LLB from Symbiosis Law School, and an LL.M. from NALSAR University. Ma'am has served as an assistant professor at Symbiosis and has worked with the Department for Promotion of Industry and Internal Trade, focusing on IPR negotiations and policy research. With rich experience in entertainment law through roles at Z Entertainment and the Fashion Law Journal, she has a blend of expertise with a passion for media and culture. We are excited to have her on the podcast today. Hello and welcome to Brief Encounters. It is such an honor having you on our platform here.
Thank you.
So, your journey has actually been quite different from a lot of our guests, and I found it extremely unique and quite relatable, I would say, because your academic journey began with a bachelor in mass media from the
Mhm.
University of Mumbai, where you even
Mhm.
received a gold medal for academic excellence. What initially drew you to journalism, and how did your interest evolve towards law then?
Okay. Yeah, I think I'm one of those very few people who's transitioned from, Bachelor of Mass Media, which is called BMM in Mumbai, to law. And my initial, sort of inspiration to get into BMM was to understand films, music. So as a kid, I used to audition a lot, as like a child music artist and things like that. And yeah, and I did want to pursue a full-time career in music, but then back then, it was not considered very lucrative. And my parents were like, what, you need to get a degree and things of that sort. And then I was like, fine, my dad really helped me. He was like, you're a creative person, why not get into BMM? And then I enrolled in BMM, after which I specialized in journalism. So in my third year, I took up journalism instead of advertising. And while I was doing my journalism specialization, I studied media law as an entire subject. And that's where I picked up my interest in law because I was so fascinated and I knew so little while I was studying. And I was just like, oh, what is a judicial review? What is this? What is that? I would really, pester my teacher. I would just be like, I don't understand this, can you help me? And they would be like, you know what? You should not get into such depths of reading, just do your preliminary or cursory studying or reading, just don't get into it too much. But I would be so curious. I'd be like, I want to do more. And that's when I thought, okay, I think law is a good option. I like knowing more about law. And my initial idea was that if you're a good lawyer, you're also a good journalist because you know more about the society. Yeah, you know what affects people. And you have a solid, understanding of certain social, political, economical, historical concepts as well. Everything is sort of intermingled with law. So I was very fascinated, and that's when I decided to pursue law. Yeah.
That is a great story, and it's especially how organic your journey was with
Yeah.
slowly discovering your passion for understanding more in depth about media law. I think that's amazing to know about. The reason why I said it was a little relatable because I was confused between journalism and law as well back in 10th grade when I was
Really?
when I
Okay.
was picking through a different option every day. I used to wake up and I'm like, today I want to be a doctor. So
Yeah.
it was between journalism and law at the end, and I went for law. So it's great seeing how your journey went from there.
Thank you
Um,
so much. Yeah.
so you went on to pursue your LLB at Symbiosis Law School, Pune. How
Mhm.
was experience there, and did you feel like was law the right choice post the media degree?
I mentioned this in one of the orientation sessions at SLS Symbiosis as well, that in my first year, I hated law. I was just like, I don't understand anything because I did the 3 year course, which is the traditional law course as opposed to the 5 year course. I was not slowly introduced to law. I was just thrown into law. I just had like 6 law subjects first semester, 6 law subjects second semester. So I used to not understand any of it. But then eventually, when I started interning, when I started understanding, oh, so this is how law applies to media, this is how law applies to things that I like, I picked up interest. And then I started picking up on the specialization subjects that I like. So not necessarily IP, I did humanitarian law and a few other things that I like studying. And then that's when I was like, okay, I like what I'm doing. And eventually, I probably did a lot of extracurricular stuff at SLS as well, which sort of gave me a lot of confidence. I think symbiosis is very important to me because I grew as a person. I think as a journalism student, I was a little more in the bookish end, I would just be reading and reading and reading. But with Symbiosis, I think I grew as a person. I developed a personality. I knew how to voice my opinions. And that's why it's really special to me. And that's why,
All right.
yeah.
Your journey was quite amazing at Symbiosis, as you explained. But what
Yeah.
extracurriculars do you think shaped you as a person, as you mentioned?
Oh, right. So I think I sort of joined a lot of clubs at Symbiosis. So I joined Tech Legal Committee and I assisted some of my teachers in a lot of their student-driven activities. So assisting them, maybe working closely with my teachers sort of helped me because I sort of figured out, where my strengths are. And actually, this leads to my second, sort of idea of a career. Like my first idea of a career was journalism, second was teaching. So one of my teachers on other SLS was like, you know what, you'll be a very good teacher. So she was
Oh,
like, you're excellent at talking, you're excellent at speaking, you're very good at sort of simplifying things. And she was just like, I don't think you're a law firm person. You're a proper teacher. And I feel like working closely with my professors in a lot of these activities and, a lot of these sort of projects that they're doing helped me understand where my strengths are as well. So I think that is how I sort of was shaped as a person. Yeah.
my God. It's so interesting to see how your professors have been sort of launch pads for you throughout your journey.
Yeah.
Beginning
Yeah.
with the journalism degree they told you for
Yeah.
law, and then for that's brilliant. That's
Yeah.
amazing.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I think you really enjoyed the law degree because then you went on to pursue two degrees in law
Yeah.
specifically while currently being in
Yeah. Yeah.
UCLA.
I
So
mean, I would say that law is not something that's very, rewarding, especially if you're a
Mhm.
first generation lawyer. So I wouldn't say that I always enjoyed my journey, but I think I stuck around. Like I
I
did. I
understand.
really did. Yeah.
Understand. That's great.
Yeah.
So after Symbiosis, you went to NALSAR for your LLM. Did you pursue a general master's or chose a particular specialization? And what was your motivation to do an LLM back then?
Okay, this was fairly economical actually. I have to be very honest. Like I wanted to pursue a degree, a master's degree, but I think at that point of time, studying abroad was kind of expensive for me. So very realistically speaking, I thought, I should consider the best colleges in India. So that's why I took CLAD and I was like, fine, I'll get into the best one in India if I can't go abroad. And I think that was my best decision in my life. I did a general specialization because I think in NALSAR, they sort of encourage you to take general specialization because they know that if you're going to be a teacher, you might have to learn a lot of other subjects as well. So you can't just stick to your specialization. Sometimes being a professor in India, you just be given a subject that you do not like. You do not know, not ever read. Even that happens. Like
Mm-hmm.
I think, for instance, I was handed out energy law once, and I had to teach the subject because there was nobody to do it. But
My
I had to study, teach myself, and then teach the other person. That's how things go. So they sort of prepared you for the realities of life, and they told you, you know what, take a general specialization, do whatever subjects you like, and go ahead. And a lot of us did that. So I did
God.
take IP. I didn't stray away completely from intellectual property,
Mhm.
but I did a lot of other subjects as well. Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
So, having studied at three very distinct institutions, a state university with Mumbai University, a
Yeah.
private university, Symbiosis, and then a public law school at NALSAR, what key strengths and weaknesses did you observe in each type of institution? And from a student's perspective, which model do you think offers the most benefits and why?
Right. So I think it's unfair to compare Mumbai University to the law degree courses because they were two different courses, right? When it comes to journalism, I had to be a little more active. I had a lot of projects where I would be doing documentaries, I'm sort of analyzing movies, doing film studies and things like that. It was too very, very practical. So naturally more enjoyable because I think pop culture and film and everything else is sort of exciting to learn about. So it's kind of more interesting to get to know, as opposed to law where you're just initially just reading, right? Law is a lot of reading and a lot of studying and things like that. So I would say that universities generally in Mumbai or maybe some other state universities, the focus is not on the theoretical aspects of your degree. It's a lot more on how you understand the course through certain projects, and that sort of shaped me in terms of making me understand how the realities of life really are. Like you're not just a student, you're also trying to interact with people outside your classroom. That was very different for me. So when I was making a documentary, I'd be speaking to so many, random people on the street. So that's a different experience altogether. I'm trying to get the pulse of what people are thinking. It's very different. As opposed to law, where you're just, sort of interacting with your own peers. You're in a bubble for a while, you're like trying to figure out how law works. But I think with Symbiosis, I love the fact that I was with a lot of ambitious people of similar mindset. So we would all push each other into, getting good internships. And the focus was a lot on getting good internships and things like that. So we'd all be like, oh, you know what, we should apply to these places, get a nice experience. And I think people there go on to do more than 10 internships. I've also seen people doing that. So I'd love that. So I would just be like, you know what, by looking at that person, I want to do more. So that was important for me as well, as opposed to NALSAR, where that was a whole different world. Like my brother jokes about this to me. He's like, that was your echo chamber. They were all like-minded people, all thinking alike, everybody, in the same kind of mindset. I loved my time there because I think that was something very beautiful, because I was not only intellectually challenged, I also learned so much from my professors. And I think I picked up on their teaching style and I sort of used that later in my career. So each degree had something to add to me. And yeah, that's how it goes.
Wow, that's great. So, after completing your studies, you qualified the UGC NET and dived into the academic world, which you said that was an initial passion from Symbiosis as well.
Yeah.
So what drew you to academia other than, of course, your professors and your interest in the field? And how easy or difficult was it from being on the other side of the table, from the student to the faculty?
Okay. Yeah. I think teaching sort of came naturally to me. It was not very difficult for me. Right. So I wouldn't say I come from a family of professors, but I think extended family, they're all teachers. And my dad also has a degree in teaching. So, the way he used to teach me when I was a kid was also like there was some scientific methodology to whatever method that he was using on me. There was some trick that he was using to help me learn and things like that. So he's had a significant impact on how I learn. So I think some things came naturally to me. I enjoyed teaching the subjects that I like, because I think this is one best thing about Symbiosis, because they let me pick the subjects that I like studying. And when you sort of like studying a certain subject, you would also love teaching it, right? Because you're so well versed. You're constantly reading about the same thing again and again. So it keeps the passion alive. So that sort of helped me. And I think it kind of came naturally to me. It wasn't very difficult. I know you do have your good and bad days. I think as a rookie teacher, you make a mistake and then sort of people sort of, attack you very easily because you're young, right? So that happens a lot. I think in India, being a young teacher is kind of hard, because earning the respect, especially for a person like me who went back to their own college, like I also taught a group of students whom I was in the hostel with. So, yeah.
My God.
So it's kind of hard to command their attention because they won't take you seriously, right? I mean, it's very hard. So for a young teacher, I think earning that respect and commanding and having a certain kind of, control over the classroom is very hard. However, I think with a lot of help from my other colleagues who are also my teachers, and certain other people who sort of help me understand what to do, what not to do, I think I enjoyed my time. Yeah.
Wow. So there was like a lot of overlapping that was taking place in this.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, it is tough. So already holding an LLM degree from NAS, what motivated you to pursue a second master's degree? And additionally, what factors influenced your decision to pursue it abroad?
Right. So I think I sort of took a brief break from teaching when I moved to Delhi. So I got into policy, and my reasons were a little different. So not that I not enjoy teaching, I'm sorry. I do enjoy teaching. But the kind of research that you're doing as a teacher, I felt like nobody was really reading what I was doing, and I was not really enjoying the kind of research that people do in universities, right? So I'm not saying that those who do it are not good at what they're doing, or they should not be, respected. I mean, kudos, because that's really tough. right? I mean, publishing papers are not easy. But I felt like my research has to have a direct impact. I mean, that's how I like to do it. Like, I want to see my research going somewhere, like some immediate action to it. So that's why I think I sort of thought of like getting into IP policy a bit. And then so I went to Delhi for a while. I took up a legal consultant like job with the Ministry of Commerce, and my exposure there was very different. So connecting back to NALSAR, in NALSAR I did this one subject called International IP, and I had never imagined I would have to use it. So I would just be like, oh, I'm doing a lot of interest, but I don't know if I'll ever use it. But life really surprises you, right? And then when I went to Delhi, that was the kind of work that they were doing. They were doing international IP, and I was like, thank God I read it. At least I'm not clueless. And because, they didn't even ask me what department I was supposed to be, and I just joined and they were like, this is your department. And I was just like, wow.
Thank you for that.
Yeah. I was like, okay, I'm getting lucky here. And then, so I did help the department with, research for negotiation. So they would negotiate with other countries on IP. So negotiations would be on certain key points like trademarks, geographical indications, some bit of copyright and things like that. And so in that process, I would meet a lot of people from so many other countries, like they would be diplomats and their teams coming from Australia, some meetings with the US, USPTO. And that's when I realized that, oh my God, to negotiate, you need to know what happens in the other country as well. So what I realized was that even though we have these international, instruments that govern the IP law, we still have these, very small differences that sort of make or break a deal. It's really important. Sometimes it can lead to stalling for like years. So I was like, yeah, you need to understand. You need to be more, globalized. You need to understand what other jurisdictions are also doing with their IP. And that sort of motivated me to apply to the US. And US, because I feel like US has a certain kind of influence over IP as compared to other countries, because they have like these important policies and a lot of focus on IP as compared to others, and they sort of are the global leaders. So that's why it was my natural choice. Yeah.
Understandable. So many applicants struggle with choosing the right LLM specialization. I understand completely how you narrowed down on intellectual property law, but why was IP law the specific specialization that you chose? Was it just the personal passion or a strategic career decision?
Okay. I think my most dominant sort of, decision making was because of the fact that I enjoy the fact that IP is also creative in its approach. Like it lets your creativity out. I mean, if you're a creative person, I think you do like to enjoy IP. It's not very difficult. So I think that sort of motivated me. I think otherwise also, I feel like the other areas of law are something that did not, I don't know, feel very interesting to me while I was studying. No offense to anybody, but like if I would read company law, I would just be like, oh, I don't want to do it, I think you just know, right? Like
Yeah,
deep down, just like, I'm not enjoying this, and some people do, like they love doing company law and mergers and things like that. And I was just like, no, this is not my cup of tea. And I was pretty sure that, I don't enjoy it. Like, even if you asked me to do it, I would just not enjoy it. So, and as opposed to IP, where I would just be like, oh, I'm enjoying what I'm studying. So I think it all just came down to what I was enjoying. If I didn't enjoy it, I would just be like, I don't want to do it. I don't want to push myself just because it's lucrative. That's not my approach.
That's very
Yeah,
important.
because I feel like if you're liking something, you're naturally good at it and you naturally chase opportunities.
100%.
That's my line of thinking.
That's wonderful. So UCLA is a dream college for so many. But what universities made it to your final shortlist? And then what factors ultimately led you to choose UCLA as your destination?
Right. So this is kind of tricky because I think the application window sort of varies, and you have to apply to certain bigger universities early and then some much later. However, I think when I chose my universities, I'll not be dishonest with you about this, but I sort of also looked at the rankings of the universities and not just the course, because I feel like I think your ranking sort of affects your job prospects. So even if you're in a decent university, I think there are certain people, certain employers, who sort of look at the ranking of the university and they
100%.
may give somebody else a chance. So I was keeping that in mind. So I picked the first few ranking colleges. So the T14 concept in US universities is sort of important here. There are these certain 14 universities that rank very high. So I picked my universities from that list, right? So I actually made it through Berkeley and Duke as well.
Wow.
And yeah, it was sort of conflicted, because
Mhm.
I think they're all very good
Amazing
universities.
options, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. In fact, we had a session with Berkeley and UCLA in India. They came to India, they talked to us, they were all trying to tell us what is good about the university and what is not. So it was a tough decision, but it did come down to money as well. So the scholarship, I think UCLA was very generous with the scholarship. And I think I also like how UCLA is in a very convenient location. So that also matters, right? Being in Los Angeles sort of maybe opens up more opportunities to you. Berkeley is equally good. I mean, you're in San Francisco. That's great. However, I think since I was more into entertainment, I thought, okay, UCLA is my best shot. And they gave a very generous scholarship. So I just picked it up. I loved being there. So I would love to be there. So I was just like, yeah, I think I want to go to LA once in my lifetime and study and, understand what they do.
That's
That's why I picked
that's
it.
that's so great to know. So the application process for an LLM in the US, it can be intense. How did you
Hmm.
navigate this process? Were there any unexpected challenges or
Hmm.
surprises along the way?
Yeah. I think most challenging for me was getting my transcripts from the university because in the LLM application process, you also have to get your transcripts from your other degree, even if it's a non-law degree. So I think getting transcripts from a state university can get really hard because you would have to, try to get in touch with people who are not accessible. So much so that I had to send a family member, who had to go back to Mumbai, stay there
Oh,
for a week, get the entire thing done, and then send it back on time. And reaching America on time is another hurdle. So I think that was my most unexpected challenge. Like it was a non-law degree.
yeah.
I mean, it was not even that important to
Right.
considering whatever I had to go through, but that still created a lot of problems for me. But yeah, I mean, that's a process. So I had to go through it. So this was kind of difficult for me. However, I think after that experience, I ensured that I made a YouTube video on it. I was just like, you know what, you want the transcripts? Here it is, because
Wow.
I struggled. Yeah. So I was just like, I need to help people because that's too much of a pain. Yeah.
Wow. That's
Yeah.
amazing. I
Yeah.
really enjoyed this about your journey, about how whenever you faced a problem and you dealt with it, you made sure that other people knew how to deal with that problem in the future, because I believe that's something that everyone will face at some point.
Yeah.
Even if they shouldn't, they might. So
Yeah.
that's quite amazing in your journey, genuinely.
Thank you.
Um, so as I mentioned, I was going through your LinkedIn, and you have recently shared valuable insights on creating a
Mhm.
strong statement of purpose for applications. For those who haven't read your LinkedIn post, could you walk us through your SOP working, the making process, and what you believe worked best for you?
Sure. I mean, I think these are key points. I wouldn't say these are like the short points. I wouldn't say these are the only points that you should be, writing in. But I mean, this is sort of logic to what I had done. So I sort of started out with my experience, like my childhood experience, how I'm connected to entertainment, why I'm interested in it, And they love personal stories. So they love, anything that's connected to your own life and your career. So it has to be related, right? I remember and this is again a helpful tip, you should attend these sessions that the admission offices do before the application window. So ensure that sort of attend those sessions. They tell you what to look for in the SOP. And I remember, I think I was doing Michigan's session, and then this lady was like, something as ordinary that I got into geology because I would go with my dad to this forest and pick up rocks and things like that. Those things, sort of stick with them.
Mm-hmm.
That's when I realized that you need to have a personalized story. So I started out with that. And then I highlighted some of my professional experiences, but not all of them. I think you have to really sort your professional experiences out. So not everything will contribute to your story necessarily. So you have to pick what adds to your story. And I also sort of highlighted what didn't work for me. I was very honest about my journey. So I know there's a tendency wherein people just sort of give a laundry list of achievements. Oh, I did this,
Mhm.
I did that, I'm so good, I'm the best student, blah, blah, blah. But I think that approach does not work in the US because you have to come off as somebody who also is very perceptive, right? Who understands where their flaws are, whatever is not working out for you, or how did you understand a gap and how you're trying to address it. So when I listed out my achievements or my professional experience, I picked out the best and the worst as well. So I also mentioned that while I was doing something like this or certain project, I felt like I don't know enough. I felt like I need to study more. There's some gap in my understanding and things like that. I also added sort of a small analysis on my take on a certain subject, and this was not very cursory. So I sort of did some kind of a research. So I'll give you an example, maybe. In my SOP, I addressed the fact that when you look at geographical indications, there are certain caste dynamics in the picture, right? So I gave an example of this one geographical indication in India where the people who sort of perform that craft are women, right? They're not men. But the people who filed for the geographical indication were men, right? And I made the effort of going through the application and checking who applied for the geographical indication, how are they going to benefit, and when this for certain, activity or craft is predominantly women, why is a guy applying for it, right? So I sort of highlighted the fact that in India, you do have hierarchies in place, and people don't understand that these sort of also affect your IP. When you understand IP, you're only looking at somebody's rights or who is getting the money. But what you don't see is that is the rightful person getting the rights, right? Is somebody who's a true representative who's getting the rights? Is he necessarily the author, or is he necessarily the proprietor and things like that? They don't really look at the social fabric of India and apply that to, IP. So I ensured that I did my research and it was pretty thorough. I put that portion in my SOP as well, because then that's where I sort of highlight my analytical skills, right? I'm not just looking to understand these subjects, not just reading and just knowing, oh, this is IP, this is the term, this is, whatever territory, and this is whatever rights are applicable, blah, blah, blah. That's not how I'm looking at IP. I'm reading it, I'm synthesizing it, I'm sort of, understanding how IP applies. I'm trying to understand the gaps. There's an academic, gap that people should be looking at and things like that. So this was, I think, very important. I think that distinguishes you from other candidates because they sort of see that, oh, you have a certain kind of advanced understanding and not necessarily something very basic. Because I think if you're a master's student, they would expect you to have certain kind of analytical skills. So they would want to see that. After which, I also mentioned my professors, whoever I want to study under. Like right now, I'm doing music industry law by this professor called Susan Genko. She's very popular in UCLA. So I mentioned her, and I told her that I'm interested. I told her that I'm interested in music. I want to learn from her, and this is it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You have provided such a fresh take on IP, which I have never heard before in law
Yeah.
school and before that. And I completely understand why your recipe stood out to them in comparison to so many others. So
Yeah.
congratulations on that. I think that's
Thank
an
you.
amazing way to going about it.
Yeah.
So besides the SOP, the recommendation letter process can feel very overwhelming for many
Mm.
applicants.
Mm.
So considering your journey and how you've been through so many different institutes, how do you decide whom to ask for recommendations, and what advice would you give to students for building strong relationships with professors for these impactful recommendations?
I think for me, it was fairly simple. I actually went to those people who sort of have belief in me that I can do
Mhm.
good. Yeah. It was not because they have very high ranking titles or they were very high in the hierarchy and things like that. In fact, I went to my mentor who was sort of, I didn't interact with him constantly, but he was sort of
Mhm.
available. But he was my mentor while I was interning, and this was like back in 2017. But I went back to him as well. And I
Wow.
told him that, yeah, I told him that, I'm applying and can you, write out a recommendation letter for me? And he was very happy to do it because I know when I was working with him, he was very encouraging, and he sort of understood my skills, and he sort of had belief in me that I would do well. So I think the key is sort of going to people who have confidence in you, because then it shows. I think when they're writing it for you, it shows that, oh, you know what, they really believe in you. So I know that a lot of people think that you have to maybe go to somebody who is a big shot or somebody who's like very well known, but I think that's not the case. You need to go to somebody who is in good relations with you, actually, like who knows you personally as well. Not just about your skills, it's about who you are as a person. Like even my boss at Symbiosis Pune, she's obviously the director of Symbiosis, and she's a very busy person, and she would not probably write letters with everybody. But because, I work so closely with her, and I believe that, she sees some potential in me, she was willing to do it. So you have to really find those people who
100%.
encourage you. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's the key. Knowing they should know you very well.
100%.
Yeah.
Only then can they reflect what they truly think about you in the letter.
Yeah. Otherwise, you can see, actually, you can read a recommendation letter and know that, this is not true. Like, this is not a true reflection of what they believe in that person. Yeah.
Sometimes they're quite generic, and then you're just like, you're just writing what they would write for every other student.
Yeah.
That is very great advice. So now this is a very big debate when it comes to pursuing and whether to pursue it right after undergrad or gain work experience first. You've navigated this path yourself, wherein you did your first master's a year later and a second master's a few years down the line. In hindsight, do you think your LLM journey would have been different if you had pursued it at a different stage in your career?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. So I think I consider myself lucky. That's it. Because I got to experience it, right after college, and also like at this juncture after I worked for a bit. Because I think fresh out of college, my perspective was very different as opposed to right now. Fresh out of college, even when I was picking out subjects, I was sort of studying subjects that I sort of romanticized. There was no practical outcome to it. I was just like, oh, I love doing this. Pretty interesting, very academic. I want to study, I want to know, I want to see the world and things like that, right? As opposed to now, where in fact, I have dropped courses and I'm just like, at work, they don't want to know the philosophy of something at this point, because I am not at a stage where an employer would ask me, oh, what is the philosophy behind so-and-so decision in certain law, right? They would just be like, do you know what the OECD guidelines are? It comes down to that. So I think my perspective sort of has changed over a period of time. If you have to pick between the two, right? When it comes to, I think, studying, right? I think it's easier to study straight out of college. It's very easy because you're in the habit of reading, you're sort of doing your assessments, continuously, constantly. So you're not forgetting certain things, your skills are intact and things like that. Whereas opposed to now, when I've come back to my college after a while, it gets sometimes a bit hard for me because there are certain things that I've forgotten to do. I have to relearn, I have to spend more time doing and things like that. But again, I think it shows if you're an experienced professional, I think how you pick your courses, how you look at the course changes. A general suggestion is to do it after certain experience. If you're going abroad, maybe that doesn't have an effect when you're studying in India. But if you're going abroad, you should get some experience because the experience helps you in getting a job later on. Yeah, so that's a very practical decision, I think. It's not about how you're studying and what you're studying or what courses you're picking. It's about how, because there's so much at stake when you're studying abroad, your working experience should count. So I think working in a law firm or working as a lawyer or practicing or maybe just doing a researcher role, helps because that's when they know that, oh, this person has some experience and then there are some transferable skills that can be applied to my jurisdiction. And then they are very reluctant in taking you. So that's kind of important. Yeah.
I think that's some great advice. And I think you're like the perfect person to answer this debate and settle it.
Yeah.
You've experienced both. So I think that's wonderful advice.
Yeah.
So as a recipient of the Dean's Tuition Fellowship at UCLA, how was your experience with the scholarship application process? And how did you approach funding your LLM additionally? Did you explore any alternative funding options along the way?
Okay. I think with UCLA, the dean's fellowship is sort of automatic. You don't really ask for additional, essay and things like that. You sort of look at your SOP, your credentials. It's a holistic, approach. And then they sort of change the amount is what I know. So the amount depends on how much they think they should be giving you. So if you have a strong SOP, strong credentials, and you tend to get a higher amount. And if you've done something remarkable, you may even get a full scholarship. So I think the key is maybe distinguishing yourself in the SOP. And I think that helps you with the scholarship, and the amount varies. So otherwise, for outside funding, I didn't really consider because I wanted to stay here for a while. Yeah. With external funding, I think the condition is that you have to come back and return to your home country for a bit. So that was not really my, not in my agenda. So I didn't consider. However, I think if others are considering, then you should consider Fulbright scholarships, and things like that. You should really look into those things. Yeah.
Right. Makes sense. So in
Yeah.
UCLA, since you specialize in entertainment law, could you share which electives you chose and which ones are the most popular amongst your peers? And
Right.
clinics and externships, as I've heard, are very, very
Hmm.
important when it comes to US LLMs especially. So how
Yeah.
did they shape your experience during your LLM journey?
Yeah, that's a very good question because I think a lot of us struggled here. Like we got in, but we didn't know what subjects to take, and they were not necessarily as good as others told us it would be. So, and sometimes your interests are not the same as others, so you don't know which ones to take.
Right.
So, I think entertainment is one of the most popular specializations here. So, compulsory subjects would include the broader entertainment law and one course which is related to IP. So you either take a survey course on IP or just copyrights or just trademarks. So these two are like compulsory courses. After which you can take certain electives. So last semester I took news media law. And this semester, I've been taking music industry law. I've also taken artificial intelligence law. So this is new in UCLA. They're very good. We have professors who've taught in Harvard, and they're really good. And with AI, what I love about this course is that he's not just doing, law. He has a sociological approach to law, which I personally love. And I feel like it's very important. Interdisciplinary studies are like major right now. So I think I love the fact that he's doing that. And with people like Susan Genko and others, who are doing using industry law, they're industry professionals. So I think what I love about UCLA's electives is that they call industry professionals and they give you sort of industry insights into what's happening. So they do a lot of contract drafting with you, current deals that they're doing, what's happening in the market and things like that. So you get a lot of exposure. And I think other popular subjects, you have other courses like harmonizing Hollywood, there's guilds, and some of the courses that are related to labor laws in entertainment. So that's also an approach that people take. So you're not necessarily just into IP, right? When it comes to entertainment, you also may want to look at employment and labor when it comes to entertainment. And being in California, I think labor laws are really important because they're big on it. So some people especially try to take those electives. They just take electives pertaining to labor law, but in the entertainment side, and then they continue the path that way. And there are other specializations as well, but I think this is the most popular one. And one thing that I learned after coming here is that even immigration applies to entertainment. Very interesting. I didn't know. Right? There are people who do entertainment and immigration, so they just look into visas for, say, an artist who's coming into LA or into America and things like that. So you can like really specialize in the US. You can be very specialized in your approach. Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
So, having studied in both India and the US and having teaching experience in India, what key differences have you observed with regards to the teaching methodologies and the learning pedagogies between the two systems?
Right. So I think I enjoyed my studies both in India and the US. I don't know, I shouldn't be saying this, but I feel there's a wrong notion that, courses abroad are better than those in India. That's an absolute wrong notion because I feel like there are universities in India that are top notch and, both approaches sort of work for you if you're a good student. So, going abroad just because it's a good university or maybe better than India is a very false notion. Like, I think they're both at par, right? However, there are certain differences in how you learn and differences in how they teach. So in India, my learning was a little more on the jurisprudential side. So that sort of built my foundational understanding to IP, right?
Right.
So it was very important because they are sort of clearing my basics, and why certain laws exist. And, my entire focus is not just on getting a job and learning practical skills, but maybe understanding the core, theories that apply to the law and things like that, which is very important which is very important for anybody, actually. So I sort of enjoyed studying that. And in the US, it's very practical. So they would just be sort of helping you understand how certain clauses are important, right? So why these clauses are there in this contract, and why should you be, looking at these clauses to benefit your party in a transaction. And so we have a lot of negotiation sessions in class. So as a part of the course, we do negotiations. They split you up in teams. They'll be like, oh, this is the situation. You will represent somebody, you will represent the opposite party, now sit and negotiate. So, it's a very practical an approach. So I
Like
think
the
both.
ADRs that we do in college.
Yeah,
Something
yeah.
along those lines, right?
Yeah. So a large focus is on that.
Of course.
Yeah. So I think in India, a large focus is on learning, get your basics right. Yeah. Maybe theoretical foundation has to be more stronger. And they think that you learn when you're outside, like when you intern and when you're like working, you pick it up by yourself. But in the US, I think in the classroom, it's very heavy, very practical heavy. You're not necessarily doing heavy readings on why Lockean theory applies. You're not really necessarily doing that. But maybe that's limited to UCLA. I'm sure there are other universities that have a different approach. But
Oh no,
in
I've heard a
contrast,
similar approach in so many other
yeah,
guests I've talked to. It's a
yeah,
very practical approach when it comes to
yeah,
US and UK as well. So
yeah,
which
yeah.
one would you prefer if you have a preference between the two?
I think since I'm, slightly more academic, I liked
Mm-hmm.
the Indian style of,
Oh, wow.
studying, because I think that sort of built my foundation strong,
Understand.
like
Understand.
that usually helps me now as well. And I loved it. I loved it. But
That's
obviously,
amazing.
like I said, both have certain kind of importance in my life. I'm
Right.
doing another course only because maybe I want to learn more about the practical realities of life, right?
True.
So I think at what stage you're learning is also important.
Very true.
Yeah.
Very true. Wow. So you actively share insights and engage with your audience in LinkedIn, as I've mentioned before, positioning yourself as a thought leader in IP, media, entertainment law. What motivates you to consistently put your thoughts out there? And how do you approach crafting content that resonates with both legal professionals and a broader audience?
Right. So I think this is important now because I feel like there's a certain kind of saturation in content.
Mm-hmm.
You see the same kind of thing. Now everybody is just giving their advice, everybody's just talking about the same thing. I think what really stands out is if you are sitting and researching for a while and thinking about certain topics. So I think I give a lot of gap in my posts. It's not because I have to churn out content every day. I genuinely post only when I'm thinking about something,
Mm-hmm.
or when I've done some thorough research. Otherwise, I do not do it. I think like you said, it has to be more organic. I'm a very organic person. I do not do it just for the sake of doing it. I like to, sit and think, reflect, put my thoughts into something. And if I think, okay, my analysis here is complete, I'm very excited to share with the world. I'm just like, I want to know your thoughts. Maybe I'm missing out on some points. Maybe I need more perspective. Maybe I need your viewpoints. And I only share because, I want to know what the others are thinking as well. Am I thinking in the right direction? Have I
Right.
found this right gap? Or maybe is my observation correct and things like that? And I think this is what most people have sort of forgotten today. They try to post because they want to be relevant, They
Mm-hmm.
want to stay at the top of
Exactly.
the
Yeah.
feed and things like that. So you don't necessarily have to put everything out. I think quality over quantity is the funda.
Very
Yeah.
true.
If that
Very true.
works, then I think people appreciate you, is what I
That is very true.
think. Yeah.
So, with regards to have you already began charting out your post LLM plans? How do you see your UCLA degree contributing to those plans? And are you considering returning to India?
I think I'm still sort of deciding. So the job market here is kind of tricky,
Right.
given my background. because I don't really have law firm experience, you know. I think law firm experience sort of helps a lot in the US because they know you sort of dealt with clients, you know, certain kind of skills
Right.
you've picked up while you're working in a law firm. So my sort of career is not a very conventional path for them, you know. Teachers usually don't end up doing another LLM and trying to work. So it's been a little tricky for me. However, in UCLA, so one thing I like about UCLA as well, they sort of help you do a lot of networking events.
Wow.
So they let you meet industry professionals. They sort of help you figure out what you want to do. So they have speed networking events, they'll have receptions, they'll have lunches, dinners, sometimes a coffee chat and things like that, where you can speak with the professional and, you know, you can probably figure out if you like this area or not. It's a little tough because I feel like the time period is not enough to build genuine connections, right? I mean, in 9 months, you know, it's very hard to have a genuine mentor or somebody to sort of
Of
help
course,
you, you
yeah.
know, get a job. However, I feel if you're consistent and you still keep in touch with somebody or maybe your professors and then ask them to help out, then maybe they will. But in all honesty, I feel the job market in the US is looking a little difficult for, you know, graduates at this point. So
Right.
I believe that I'll give this a year. Like, since I do have OPT period, I'll try to work for a year. If I feel like, you know, the jobs are not good enough for me, I'm not really enjoying what I'm doing, then I'm happy to go back to India and start teaching or do my policy research. I'm open to that idea.
Wow.
I'm not stuck on, you know, working in the US. Yeah. So I
That's
want to give
nice.
this a shot because I came here all the way from India. I want to
Yeah.
maybe keep trying. If it doesn't work out, then I'm happy to go back because I feel like there's a certain value to your degree back in India as well.
100%.
Yeah.
100%.
So I think, in fact, like you said, data protection is one of those big areas. In India, we have
Mm-hmm.
a lot of laws that are still opening up, coming up.
Yep.
Yeah, we do have opportunities coming up. So we should be
Very
open to exploring those. Yeah.
true.
Yeah.
So, like you've mentioned, you just talked about networking, and I think that is a very essential part in any student's lives. Are there any tips you would like to share with regards to networking and building connections and forming continuing connections with individuals?
Right. I think with what I've understood in networking is that I think you do not have to see immediate results. So this is what most people forget, right? You shouldn't go with the expectations that, oh, I'll speak to 5 people and maybe one of them will give me an internship or a job. I think that doesn't work. What you have
Mm-hmm.
to understand is that maybe this you have to take micro efforts and micro steps into building a longer connection. So this is an opportunity for you to meet an individual, keep in touch with them all the time. So this is what I've been
Right.
told here as well. Yeah, you should not just, you know, ask for a job up front. You should not be like, oh, you know what, I have an OPT coming up, please give me a job. That doesn't work. They told me that you should keep asking them for tips. You know, what
Right.
skills do you think I should build? What courses do you think I should take? What do you think I should read? Or maybe just check on them once in a while, keep talking to them. And then maybe just share an interesting article and be like, what are your thoughts? I have these thoughts. What do you think? So it has to be pretty organic. And there may be times when people will not respond to you and that shouldn't necessarily discourage you. It does.
True.
It's easier said than done. It definitely
Yeah.
does. And I've been in that boat as well. But however, I feel that, you know, there will be somebody who will see your skills and they'll see your efforts and that you've been consistent. And then maybe they'll acknowledge and then give you an opportunity or maybe
Wow.
help you out. I think key is just being very, very open-minded. Yeah.
That's amazing. So
Yeah.
this brings us to the last and final question of our podcast. What's the one piece of advice you would like to give to anyone considering studying law abroad or doing an LLM abroad?
Okay. I think one advice that I would give everybody, you know, anybody who's applying abroad, is to go with not the expectations of landing a job, but to learn and, you know, gain some
Right.
exposure. Because
Yeah.
it's not just about a job and earning the money. I know you have a lot at stake. I know you're spending a lot of money, but I feel like whatever you will learn through a degree will always help you at certain point in time. And maybe you can't see it at this point, but even if you have to return to India and even if you have to work, I feel that you shouldn't be discouraged because maybe your degree has certain value in some place, or maybe you'll end up a job only because, you know, you've done certain course in this college, and or maybe you just know a professor, you know,
Very true.
yeah, and who knows somebody in India and you want to work there. You don't know how life is very mysterious. I feel like it works in mysterious ways. So do not approach the course as an opportunity for a job. Approach it as an experience is what my advice. A very holistic experience because you also grow as a person. Like living abroad alone is a very different, experience.
Right.
You understand new things, you meet people from so many cultures, and you also maybe see flaws in yourself and things like that.
Right.
So you sort of build your own personality eventually.
Wow.
So see it as an experience. Yeah.
I think that's some really great advice people should definitely keep in mind.
Yeah.
And yeah, that brings us to the end of this podcast. It
Thank
was
you.
so wonderful having on here. Your journey,
You
like you
too.
mentioned, very organic, very relatable, very understandable, how you explored so many different parts of yourself, and now you're doing something that you truly enjoy at UCLA. And I wish you all the best for it. I'm
Thank you
sure
so
it'll turn
much.
out amazing.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you so much and all the best to everybody who's applying. And I hope you make it
Thank you.
through. And I hope to see you in LA. Whoever's joining
For
this.
sure, for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah.
And to our listeners, thank you so much for joining in. We hope you enjoyed this podcast as much as I did. And keep listening. This is Riya on Brief Encounters.
Thank you.